Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Humanity's final stand against an impending alien invasion began not with a grand speech or a historic moment, but with a somber, world-weary announcement that crackled across every screen on Earth. The voice, flat and devoid of hope, delivered the grim news: the aliens were here, and their fleet outnumbered humanity's defenses 1,000 to 1. In the depths of the Citadel, a heavily fortified military base buried beneath miles of steel and concrete, Captain Elena Marlowe stood before her crew. The Titan, Prometheus, a colossal war machine bristling with the most advanced weaponry Earth could muster, loomed above them, its presence both reassuring and ominous. Marlowe's blue eyes, cold as the void of space, scanned the faces of her team, faces etched with tension, resolve, and fear. "Mission parameters are clear," she began, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil roiling within her. "We are to engage the alien mothership Mechs, currently stationed on the dark side of the moon. Our objective: neutralize it and force the enemy into retreat." Lieutenant James "Jax" Harper shifted uneasily. The pilot's sharp features, usually animated by a cocky grin, were now shadowed with doubt. He had been at odds with Marlowe ever since the loss of their last mission. The scars from that failure were fresh, festering in the minds of those who survived. Jax still blamed her. He always had. Dr. Ava Kincaid, the Titan's chief engineer, remained silent, her hands clasped behind her back. The woman was a mystery even to Marlowe. Brilliant, precise, and utterly detached, Kincaid never spoke of her past, nor of the strange, almost alien technology she had incorporated into Prometheus. Marlowe suspected Kincaid knew more about the enemy than she let on, but now wasn't the time to question her. Sergeant Lucas Reyes, their weapons specialist, gave Marlowe a subtle nod. He was the backbone of the crew, a steady presence amidst the chaos. But Marlowe had noticed his pallor, the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking. She hadn't asked him about it, hadn't pressed. She couldn't afford to lose him. "Not now, let's get this over with," Jax muttered under his breath, but loud enough for Marlowe to hear. She met his gaze, her expression hardening. "We fight as a unit," she replied sharply. "This mission is bigger than any of us. If you have a problem, Harper, speak now." Jax clenched his jaw, his hands balling into fists. For a moment, it seemed as if he might explode, but then he looked away, his anger simmering just below the surface. "No problem, Captain. Just hope you've got the guts to see this through." Marlowe held his gaze for a beat longer before turning away. "Prepare for launch." The crew moved with the efficiency of seasoned soldiers, each absorbed in their tasks. Marlowe watched them from the command chair as the Titan roared to life, its massive engines vibrating through the steel floor. Prometheus, a towering colossus of metal and fury, surged upward, bursting free from the Earth's atmosphere and into the cold expanse of space. As they cleared the last vestiges of the planet's gravitational pull, the enormity of their mission settled over them like a shroud. The alien fleet, a vast armada of sleek, silver ships, spread across their sensors, blocking out the stars. Jax muttered a curse under his breath as the sheer scale of the enemy became apparent. "Stay focused," Marlowe ordered. "This isn't about fighting the entire fleet. Our target is Nyx. We get in, we hit it hard, and we get out." Jax's hands tightened on the controls. "If we're not blown to pieces first." They passed through the outer fringes of the alien armada, skirting patrols and evading detection with practiced precision. The Titan's stealth systems, a testament to Dr. Kincaid's genius, held true, and they slipped through the enemy's defenses like a ghost in the night. But as they approached the dark side of the moon, where Nyx lay in wait, the tension aboard Prometheus reached a breaking point. Without warning, alarms blared, and the Titan shuddered violently. A squadron of alien ships had appeared out of nowhere, cutting off their approach. The crew scrambled into action as Jax swore and banked hard to avoid incoming fire. "How the hell did they find us?" he shouted, wrestling with the controls as the Titan twisted through a barrage of energy blasts. Marlowe's mind raced. This ambush was too precise, too perfectly timed. Someone had tipped them off. But who? Kincaid, status report, she barked, as the engineer's hands flew across her console, shields holding. But we can't take much more of this, Kincaid replied, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. Return fire. Marlowe ordered, and Reyes was already on it, the Titan's massive cannons roaring to life. Energy bolts erupted from Prometheus, tearing through the alien ships with devastating accuracy. But for every ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. We're getting overrun. Jax yelled, panic edging into his voice. Marlowe clenched her teeth. This wasn't just an ambush, it was a slaughter. If they didn't find a way out, Prometheus would be torn apart, and with it, humanity's last hope. Kincaid, any weaknesses in their formation? Marlowe demanded, but before Kincaid could respond, Jax turned on her, his eyes blazing with fury. Maybe you should be asking her how they knew we were coming, he shouted. It's too perfect, Marlowe. Someone's selling us out, and I'm betting it's her. The accusation hung in the air, a tangible thing that sucked the oxygen from the room. Kincaid's expression didn't change, but Marlowe saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. I'm not your enemy, Lieutenant, Kincaid said evenly, but the words carried no warmth enough. Marlowe snapped. We don't have time for this. Kincaid, focus on getting us through this. Jax, fly the damn ship. Jax glared at her, his knuckles white as he gripped the controls. Aye, Captain. But the seeds of doubt had been planted, and Marlowe knew that even if they survived this battle, the trust among her crew was unraveling. The Titan shuddered again as another wave of enemy fire slammed into them. Shields flickered, and Marlowe's heart skipped a beat as warning lights flashed across the consoles. They were running out of time, Kincaid, now. Marlowe barked, her voice cutting through the noise. Kincaid didn't hesitate. Her fingers flew over the controls, and suddenly, the Titan lurched forward, pushing through the enemy lines with a speed and force that caught the aliens off guard. They broke through, the alien ships scattering in disarray. We're clear. Jax announced, disbelief coloring his tone, but Marlowe didn't feel relief. They were clear, but the cost had been high. The Titan's shields were nearly depleted, and the damage to their systems was severe. And there was still the matter of the traitor in their midst. Set course for Nyx, Marlowe ordered, her voice cold and hard. We finish this. As they closed in on the alien mothership, a behemoth of twisted metal and eerie, pulsating light, the atmosphere aboard Prometheus grew even tenser. The crew was on edge, every glance tinged with suspicion. Marlowe kept her eyes on the massive ship looming before them. This was it. If they could destroy Nyx, the alien fleet would be crippled, and Earth would have a fighting chance. But first, they had to survive the final assault. Jax, bring us in close. Kincaid, prepare the targeting systems. Reyes, get ready to fire on my command. The Titan powered forward, and for a moment, it seemed as if they might actually succeed. But then, as they entered the mothership's defensive perimeter, something went wrong. Captain, we've lost targeting control. Kincaid's voice was sharp with alarm. Damn it, how? Marlowe demanded, but even as she asked, she knew the answer. The traitor had made their move. Before she could react, the comms crackled to life, and a voice Marlowe hadn't expected to hear filled the room. Captain Marlowe, I'm afraid this is where our paths diverge. It was Dr. Kincaid. But the calm, collected engineer wasn't speaking from her usual station. She stood at the entrance to the control room, holding a device that pulsed with a sickly green light. Kincaid, what the hell are you doing? Jax spat, his voice thick with betrayal. I'm saving humanity, Kincaid replied, her tone disturbingly serene. The aliens are too powerful, too advanced. Our only hope is to negotiate, to show them that we're willing to cooperate. This is the only way. Marlowe stared at her, the pieces falling into place. Kincaid's aloofness, her obsession with alien technology, the way she'd always seemed one step ahead, it all made sense now. She'd been planning this from the start. "You're a traitor," Marlowe said, her voice low, dangerous. Kincaid shook her head, her expression almost pitying. "I'm a realist, Captain. I'm doing what you can't, ensuring humanity's survival." Without warning, Kincaid pressed a button on the device, and the Titan's systems went dark. The lights flickered out, and the control panels went dead. They were helpless, adrift in the shadow of the alien mothership. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the distant hum of the mothership's energy core. Then, Reyes, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "You're wrong, Kincaid," he said quietly. "Humanity doesn't survive by bending the knee to its enemies. We fight, no matter the odds. No matter the cost." With that, Reyes lunged at Kincaid, knocking the device from her hands. It clattered to the floor, and as Kincaid scrambled to retrieve it, Reyes drew his sidearm, aiming it at the core of the device. "Reyes, don't!" Marlowe shouted, but it was too late. The shockwave from the explosion reverberated through the ship. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered erratically, casting long, jagged shadows across the control room. Marlowe staggered to her feet, her ears ringing, and glanced around, trying to assess the situation. Reyes was slumped against the wall, blood trickling from a wound on his forehead, but his eyes were still open, blinking slowly as if trying to shake off the disorientation. Kincaid lay crumpled in the corner, unconscious or worse, her betrayal an open wound that might never heal. Jax was already back at the controls, his face a mask of concentration as he worked frantically to stabilize the Titan. "Shields are down to critical levels, engines barely responsive. We need to move now, or we're sitting ducks." Marlowe knew he was right. The damage was catastrophic, and the alien mothership Nyx loomed ahead, its vast structure pulsing with a malevolent energy. Even from this distance, she could feel the power emanating from it, a cold, implacable force that seemed to press down on them, reminding them of the hopelessness of their situation. But there was no time for despair. "Reyes, get to the weapons bay," Marlowe ordered, her voice tight with urgency. "We need every gun we have trained on Nyx's core. Jax, find us a weak spot, anything we can exploit. We're not leaving until that ship is nothing but space debris." Reyes nodded weakly, pushing himself upright despite the pain that clearly racked his body. "On it, Captain," he said, his voice hoarse but resolute. Marlowe watched him go, her heart heavy with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Reyes had always been the backbone of their crew, the one who never wavered no matter how dire the circumstances. But she could see the toll this mission was taking on him, on all of them. She had to make this count, there was no other option. "Targeting systems are still down," Jax muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. "I'm doing this manually, but it's like trying to thread a needle in the dark." "Do what you can," Marlowe replied, her mind racing through their options, or lack thereof. They were out of time, out of resources, and nearly out of hope. But if they could destroy Nyx, even at the cost of their own lives, they might buy Earth the time it needed to regroup, to mount a final defense. "Captain," Jax said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "I've found something. It's a small breach in their energy field, might be a maintenance hatch or something. It's not much, but it's the only shot we've got." "Then we take it," Marlowe said without hesitation. "Bring us in close. Reyes, prepare to fire all weapons on my mark." The Titan lurched forward, battered and barely holding together, as it approached the breach. Marlowe could feel the tension thrumming through the ship, a collective breath held by everyone aboard as they steeled themselves for what was to come. The alien ships had pulled back momentarily, perhaps sensing that Prometheus was on its last legs, or perhaps preparing for a final, overwhelming assault. "Almost there," Jack said through gritted teeth. "Just a little closer." Marlowe gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white. "Steady, steady." The breach loomed before them, a jagged tear in the otherwise impenetrable energy field that surrounded Nyx. It was small, barely large enough for them to target, but it was their only chance. If they could hit it, they might be able to trigger a chain reaction, something that would rip through the mothership's core and obliterate it from the inside. Now! Marlowe shouted. Reyes, his hands shaking but determined, unleashed everything Prometheus had left. The Titan's cannons fired in unison, a barrage of energy bolts and missiles streaking toward the breach. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a roar that seemed to shake the very fabric of space, the breach expanded, and a blinding explosion tore through Nyx's core. The alien mothership convulsed, its structure rippling as the explosion spread through its internal systems. Prometheus was caught in the shockwave, thrown back violently as the mothership began to collapse in on itself. The crew was tossed about like rag dolls, alarms screaming as the ship's systems failed one by one. Marlowe struggled to maintain consciousness, her vision swimming as the world around her became a blur of lights and sound. She could hear Jax cursing as he fought to keep control of the Titan, and Reyes labored breathing over the comms as he desperately tried to stabilize the weapons systems. But it was all falling apart, the Titan disintegrating around them even as Nyx met its fiery end. "We did it," Jax gasped, his voice a mix of disbelief and triumph. "We actually did it," but there was no time to celebrate. The Titan's systems were failing rapidly, and Marlowe knew they had only moments before they were lost as well. "Jax, get us out of here," she ordered, forcing herself to focus despite the pain lancing through her body. "I'm trying," Jax replied, his hands moving frantically over the controls. "Engines are shot, stabilizers aren't responding." "Then do it manually," Marlowe said, her voice a harsh rasp. "We need to get clear before the whole damn ship blows." Jax gritted his teeth, and with a final, desperate effort, managed to wrench the Titan away from the dying mothership. Prometheus limped away from the explosion, the once mighty war machine now a battered wreck, barely holding together. Behind them, Nyx finally detonated in a massive, blinding burst of light, a supernova of energy that sent shockwaves rippling through space. The Titan was caught in the outer edges of the blast, thrown forward with bone-jarring force. The lights flickered one last time and then went out, leaving them drifting in the cold, dark silence of space. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of their own breathing, harsh and ragged in the aftermath. Marlowe forced herself to sit up, her muscles screaming in protest, and looked around at what was left of her crew. Reyes was slumped in his chair, unconscious but alive. Jax was still at the controls, though the lights from the console had gone dark, his face lit only by the dim glow of the emergency lights. "We're alive," Marlowe said, more to herself than anyone else. "We're actually alive." "Barely," Jax replied, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "Prometheus is dead in the water. Life support still online, but that's about it." "We'll have to send a distress signal," Marlowe said, though she knew it was a long shot. The Citadel might send out search teams, but with the alien fleet still out there, scattered and leaderless though it might be, there was no guarantee they'd be found in time. Still, they had done it. They had destroyed Nyx, struck a crippling blow to the alien invasion. It had come at a terrible cost, and there was still so much left to do, but for now, at least, they had survived. "We'll figure it out," Marlowe said, more determined than ever. "We're not done yet." Jax nodded wearily, his head slumping against the back of his chair. "No, we're not." Marlowe leaned back, her body aching, and allowed herself a moment of relief. The fight wasn't over, far from it. But they had done the impossible, and that gave her hope. She glanced over at Reyes, who was beginning to stir, his eyes fluttering open. "Good job, Sergeant," she said softly, and Reyes gave her a weak, tired smile. "Just doing my duty, Captain," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. They sat there in the dark, the three of them, the last remnants of a battle-worn crew, floating through the silence of space. Marlowe closed her eyes and let herself drift, just for a moment, on the edge of sleep. The war wasn't over, and they had a long road ahead of them. But for now, they had earned this brief respite, this small victory in the vast, uncaring void. And as the distant stars flickered in the endless night, Marlowe allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they would find their way home.